Okay, can we start? Okay. Okay, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending where you are, in which time zone are you. My name is Marco Falconi. I'm the scientific coordinator of RemTech Europe. It's a conference that is held every year in September in Ferrara. And I work at ISPRA. It's the Italian Environmental Protection Agency, and my task is to deal with the 42 sites of the national priority list, are the 42 most polluted areas in Italy. Here, before presenting my colleague Valeria Ancona, that is at my side, I want to introduce you. This event is a pre-event of RemTech Europe that will be held. Let's remind the dates that are from 16 to 20 of September. And the objective of this pre-event is that we want to share competencies, know-how of various countries worldwide. So it's important to learn from other countries, other continents, because we have all countries from all 6 continents, how they deal with contaminated sites management, or also with let's say, specific issues like PFAS or like mining sites. You will learn more during this agenda. We have 10 speakers today. At the moment, just 3 are online for the first half of the session. Hoping that we will be able to find back Hassan from Bangladesh and Nezia from Morocco. So let's say let's start with the speakers that we have, then we try to recover the other speakers. I want also to remind you that you can ask questions by the chat. So put the name of the speakers that you want to address the question, and then ask your question. We would have time at the end of each of the single sessions, the single part of this session, to ask a question. So we have something like 20-25 minutes, even more if we are not able to contact the speakers, the speakers that are in the program. But then we will try to manage this. Let me remind that you would also have the presentations that will be made available by our speakers. So if you have registered online in our Google form, you will receive the available presentation from our speakers. So don't ask this in the chat. Reserve the chat for question and answer. You would also have, thanks to Valeria, also the certificate of attendance of this meeting. But don't wait, let's say, 2-3 days, because it will take around one month. So in 1 month you will receive a certificate of attendance or certificate of appreciation for who is the speaker, a certificate of attendance for who is the attendant. Having said this, I leave the floor for a brief presentation to my colleague Valeria Ancona. Valeria, floor is yours.
Thank you, Marco. Hello to everybody. Welcome to this international session of Taranto Eco Forum. I'm a researcher of Italian National Research Council. I work with nature-based solution for recovering multi-contaminated sites and also for the characterization of polluted sites. In this afternoon, we have 10 speakers, as Marco said, and in the first subsession, we find several contribute from Australia, Bangladesh, Greece, Austria, and finally from Morocco. I think that we can start. So the first.
Okay, by the way, I see also Neza that is online now.
Okay,
so I would ask
perfect.
our service to activate Neza Mejad also as co-host, co-organizzatore, so he will be able then, but he is the last speaker of the first part, so he will be able to share your screen. But hi Neza, I'm happy to see you. Okay, so we can start with the first speech. The first speaker is Andrew Mitchell from Australasian Land and Groundwater Association. He will talk about living with PFAS, and I think it's a complicated issue, Andrew, isn't it? I think
Absolutely.
PFAS are everywhere, also in pizza bags, and not just in foam of firefighters. So it's a very complicated issue. Floor is yours. You have 15 minutes, but don't worry if you have a couple of minutes more, no problem. Floor is yours, Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Marco. I appreciate that. Just to quickly introduce myself, I've been working in the contaminated land industry in Australia for nearly 30 years. I've worked for the Environment Protection Authority in the state of New South Wales. I've worked for the Department of Defence. I've worked for the Olympics back in the year 2000. And now I work in a consulting firm. I work for ADE Consulting, and I'm a member of the Australasian Land and Groundwater Association. A few months ago, we had a conference in Sydney on PFAS, and I gave this presentation about living with PFAS, and they've asked for me to share it again with you today. A very important point I must make is that I'm not speaking to people who have had their water poisoned by contamination from AFFF. I'm not speaking to people who are suffering from significant contaminated sites. That's a separate thing. I would like to put that to the side. What I'm speaking about today is all of us in our lives encountering PFAS, in our projects encountering PFAS, and working out what to do with it. Back in 2018, we had a conference on PFAS in Australia, one of the first conferences that we had at that time. In Australia, PFAS became a newspaper issue in the year 2015 due to a defence site. And since 2015, we've been working at what does it mean, what should we do, how should we manage it? So these are some questions that I asked 6 years ago at a conference. Can we ever live with PFAS? How can we make a difference that is measurable and is meaningful? There's a lot of application of the precautionary principle, but what is a proportionate application of that principle? How much is society willing to pay to address PFAS? And what is a tolerable PFAS risks? Yes, we have these guidelines, and yes, they're very low. And yes, there's a lot of uncertainties there. But if there is a problem everywhere, what are we to do? How are we to decide where we should act? How can we decide whether a response is practicable and proportionate? And how can we focus on solutions? So where are we now? Here's a quick recap of some key stats. This is by no means comprehensive. It helps to tell a story. So 90% of paper straws contain PFAS. In American seafood, 3/4 of the seafood samples contain PFAS. Apparently, someone has tested the blood of European leaders, and half of them have PFAS in their blood above the threshold of concern. People in Sweden have detected PFAS in rainwater, and people in the US as well at low levels, but it's detectable in rainwater. There's an eye drop on the market, which is 100% PFAS. An Australian study has found PFAS up to 50 parts per million in takeaway food containers. And around the world, wastewater effluent contains PFAS at a range of concentrations. It's even in ski resorts coming from ski wax. So we are surrounded in our lives, the clothes that we wear. My shirt is a non-iron shirt. It helps me get ready in the morning. It contains some PFAS. What are we to do with this? What are we to make of this? So let's take a step back. So if you look for a contaminant you will typically find it. And the nature of PFAS contamination is such that laboratories are able to find it very, very easily at low concentrations. It's nearly impossible to remove it from the environment at low levels. In Australia, we've run some pump and treat systems at defence sites, and it pumps a lot of water, and it removes the PFAS from the water very well. But what is that resulting in? How is the environment better from that investment? So we have utilities, on the one hand, releasing PFAS in the biosolids to farms, releasing it in treated water to creeks, but spending a lot of money on the other side to do a remediation of a former site. So there's not much contextualization of what's happening. In one state of Australia, in Queensland, they've published a guideline with zero, literally zero is the guideline for PFAS in some contexts. They explain what they mean. You must use the best possible tools to find it, and if you find it, you have to manage it. I know that many countries around the world are moving into a circular economy, or perhaps it's a spiral economy sometimes, but there's a significant push towards resource recovery and reuse. So in Australia, we have a lot of recycling, we have a lot of composting. That is introducing PFAS and other contaminants into these streams, and they're going around and they can actually cause harm in other circumstances. And the people who are spending all the money on it is normally it's the government, it's the large corporations, the people who are trying very hard to do the right thing are spending an enormous amount of money on addressing PFAS. So what should we do? And this is where I'm going to deviate in a presentation such as this. So I'm not telling you what we've done. I am advocating for what you should do. This is a normative presentation, which I acknowledge is unusual, and please forgive me and bear with me through this. I'm going to tell you what to do. So Deming was a pioneer in the 50s about quality control, and he has a very simple plan, do, check, act cycle. Very simple. It's very widely used. First, you identify the biggest problem in whatever your context is, whether you're a factory, whether you're a defense department, whether you're wastewater, whether you recycle soil. What's your biggest problem? And then you fix that problem. You measure the change, the improvement from having fixed the problem. Sometimes you want to tell everyone about it. The publicity can lead to other people to change their behavior as well. And then all you do is you find the next biggest problem and then continue until you can no longer make a meaningful or a measurable change. And most importantly, if making that intervention, if doing that remediation, if doing that fix is not actually going to change anything, why would you do it? And that is a question for environmental engineers and scientists to struggle with. That is a difficult question. So I'll give you examples. I'll give you 2 slides of examples. So Nguyen, in a 2022 paper, found that about 40% of PFAS load to wastewater treatment plants is from point sources. Okay, so we can't do very much about the diffuse sources from people's clothes and shampoos, but we can do something about point sources. So what can we do? We can map the time integrated PFAS inputs throughout the network. So we can work out which junctions or which pumping stations have the most PFAS. You can chase that up the line and then use regulatory tools to control the point sources. The Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation put out a report a few years ago that found nearly a third of food packaging contained high PFAS. When I say high PFAS, I mean tens of milligrams per kilogram of PFAS using the top assay. They're mostly precursors, they're complicated chemicals. You don't find them in the normal PFAS suite, but when you look at the Stockholm Convention level for PFOS is 50 parts per million, and you're getting nearly that level in takeaway food packaging, perhaps we have a problem. So what to do? Evaluate and manage the compost feedstocks, and perhaps it's time for some government intervention. And what does compostable really mean? I'll give you 2 other examples. These are common in Australian projects. an infrastructure project. They're a highway. They found some PFAS in the soils that they want to recycle off the project. And if there's PFAS in soils in some jurisdictions, you're not allowed to recycle it. How did the PFAS get there? Well, guess what? They used recycled water for dust suppression. And the recycled water came from the wastewater treatment plant, and it contained PFAS. So we can go through a process of working out whether the contamination is a primary source or a secondary source, whether it's background. We can do a water assessment to show that there's no new contamination. This is existing contamination that was already there. We can compare the treatment outcomes against the baseline. So sometimes the PFAS will require remediation, and sometimes it won't. There's a scientific process you can go through to work that out. You don't need to treat everything. And the second example is that in some areas, there's no regulation of what a concrete recycler can accept. And some concrete has been used with firefighting and AFFF and foams that contains PFAS. If you then crush that and recycle that, it might go into a water-sensitive use, which is not appropriate in some circumstances. So again, it's about measuring, it's about systems and planning, appropriate regulation, and validation of the treatment. This slide is from NHANES. It's a US program to have national pooled blood testing for a range of contaminants. This chart shows 4 specific PFAS that have been measured in Americans' blood for the past 20 years or so. It shows very clearly that when there is a regulatory change, in this case when PFOS was banned in certain circumstances in the US in the late 90s, around 2000, when that PFOS ban was put in place, the blood levels dropped very, very quickly. So with the right action, taken in the right way, we can have meaningful, measurable, significant results. My second final slide really is that yes, we must manage PFAS contamination, and perhaps in your context, in your country, it's not PFAS, perhaps it's another contaminant. But in Australia, what we've been doing over the past few years is regulating PFAS very, very heavily without necessarily having the context of what does it actually mean and what is the bigger picture. So end of pipe solutions are very, very expensive without much meaningful benefit. We must address the PFAS contamination risk further up the chain. The exemplary performers, so these are the government departments, these are the large corporate entities who generally work very hard to be a good citizen. They are bearing a disproportionate cost. The way that PFAS is being regulated is threatening some aspects of the circular economy. The sustainability versus environmental management are often in tension with each other, and it's not always working for the best for society. It's very, very important that PFAS are by no means at all the most important contaminant to look for. There are microplastics, there are pharmaceuticals and personal care products, there are pesticides, the chemical industry is amazingly innovative and will always keep coming up with amazing new chemicals. I know that Europe has a great system for regulating new chemicals. That's not the case all around the world. And so PFAS may be one thing, but perhaps there's something else there to look at as well. I'll leave you with the questions. Presence does not mean risk. Presence does not mean harm. There's other factors in there. So what amount of PFAS is tolerable? And what is the net benefit of any action? Yes, it's nice to remove one molecule, but there are many molecules there, and it won't necessarily be meaningful. What is the net benefit of any action? So thank you for your time. Here's a little wombat I saw on a bushwalk recently. I hope you found this beneficial, and I'm happy to stay around and answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Thank you. See you after for the ask and question time. And we can move for the next speakers. And I think is Dietmar because Azan is not present. And so we can start with the Dietmar presentation entitled Management of Orphan Sites in Austria. Okay, Dietmar, if you want, you can have some minutes more. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon to Taranto, here from Vienna. Thanks for the invitation to present. Well, I'm working with Environment Agency Austria, and I'm going to present on the national program on orphan sites here in Austria. So as there is a real international community, just to make clear where we are. So Austria is a small country in the heart. We are used to stay at the heart of Europe. What it means, we more or less cover the eastern part of the Alps and share our plains to Hungary, to Czechia and Slovakia and the hill lands. So what brings about that, well, a small country, only 1/3 is permanent living land, and it's an extremely diverse environment in its relief, in its climate, in its soils. What I'm going to present is to briefly cut down the policy objectives and legal framing we defined or revised 30 years ago, and we are revising nowadays. Then to provide an overview on our pillars in funding and in financing remediation projects or orphan sites or historically contaminated land, and then finally to end up with some storytelling in a case study of one of our first orphan sites we didn't necessarily remediated by ourselves. So the legal background in Austria, in its history and its development, it started more than 60 years ago when the Water Act was launched, which came forward with a really strict zero contamination policy. And then was complemented by the European Water Framework Directive in 2002. Just to, in terms of groundwater, discussing land and soil, it comes to groundwater as well, and there really the zero contamination policy is very important because simply by nature and history, Austrians are used to have their own well near the house and have their potable water, and that's something we try to keep in the long term. Soil policy is a different animal. By constitution, it's with the responsibility of the 9 Austrian provinces, which makes it a rather kind of complicated issue to some extent. By history, it comes really more from the agricultural sector. It will, in due time, then be complemented, hopefully, by the European Soil Monitoring and Resilience Directive, when we received the draft last year. Nevertheless, what is also an important driver is the Waste Management Act since 1990, because of its addressing contaminated soil, not only for excavated soils, but as well in situ. So any contaminated soil, as soon as we get the information that it's contaminated, is considered as waste and then therefore asks for getting treated and so on. Even before the Waste Management Act, it came in force a Contaminated Sites Remediation Act, which faced a major revision just recently, 2 months ago, which will come effective by next year. In 1989, we started, what I'm also showing you in the next slides, is to finance a national program simply by waste taxation. So we get money by taxing wastes, and then we use this money to remediate or to fund remediation for old orphan sites. By next year, we then will have more tailored procedures in risk assessment and remediation. So here I tried to summarize what are the major lines of considerations we discussed 30 years ago and which are still in place and I think still valid. The very first line is really and it's kind of an echo probably to Andrew before, we need to focus to serious risks, really polluted sites, which on the other hand asks for that we need to accept whatever you then in detail may discuss, what is slight or moderate contamination risks. The second line in considering our program was that if only the regulator or the general public will do, we may fail. We do need the cooperation to site owners and investors and also to multiply the money. So we opted for a funding system, of course, incentivizing by high funding rates according to a prioritization risk classification. So what you see is the range of funding you may receive if you voluntarily decide to remediate if a contamination has been discovered. A really serious contamination has been discovered around your facility. So it's 95 to down to 65 for the low private classes. At the final end, of course, you need a backup if no one else acts. So which is I call this prepare for implementing because of high public interest. So we had an article since 1989 empowering the Ministry of Environment to implement and finance, and then it comes up to 100% payment by the Republic. And we then also brought forward to a specialized company, the BALSA, which is then commissioned by the Ministry of Environment to support and implement those remediation projects. So really then to come down to earth if no one else acts. In a broader view, then here still to just put it in perspective and context, it's really what you see here is the different ways contaminated sites might be addressed in Austria due to different legal backgrounds. So we still, for recent contamination at the foreground, is really acting rapidly, really forcing the polluted to do the action. And if not complying, then of course authorities need also to come in here. Well, the brownfield and construction sector, well, let's say my hometown Vienna, you hardly will find a not contaminated lot, so, but only slightly, let's say. That's really something we believe that the market should solve. We recently, for different reasons in land recycling, started to put incentives in there, small ones as well. And the orphan site program is what is to the right, the federal funding program. In the first line, to repeat, really to attract voluntary remediation. And in the second line, if not, then by doing it ourselves through the company called BALSA. That's here now just an overview of the waste levy annual revenues. Putting it short, it's more or less that nowadays we receive an annual contribution of 60 million euro, which then is available for running the whole program. 85% of the money is going for remediation. At the right-hand side, you see what has been our expectation on the long run, that we will need to remediate 2,000 sites might need some 5 to 6 billion euro. Up to 22, we had money for remediation in turn of 1.5 billion euro. In the funding scheme, and here we see also our success, I would say. We invested close by 1 billion euro. We had more than 300 projects up to now, and we have an average funding rate, so coming through the waste level of 75%. So which means that at least every €3 we spend is added up by €1 for private investment. And then there are still some projects we really paid by 100%. Here it comes really often, of course, to complex and large sites. So there are 12 projects with 300 million euro up to now. In terms of technologies, I think Austria is a rather conservative country, so or a rather resistive market. The acceptance for in situ is still limited, although we are working for the only new technologies, I would say, during the last 10 to 15 years, which found acceptance and also practiced are then permeable barriers or funneling gate systems and thermal in situ desorption. The other ones are really classical pump and treat measures, containment, stick and dump, still with, let's say, at least as a component at every fourth project. Here, already coming to the storytelling for a typical orphan site, which is a refinery site, an old refinery site nearby Vienna, which is also kind of a classic site in terms of, as we in Austria do have serious damages from the Second World War, where, for example, refineries in a lot of industries simply were priority bomb targets to put the economy down. The general site setting, if you look for the map up right to up, there is this red rectangle, which was the former refinery, which is nowadays within the township and is close to the Danube River and immediately nearby important infrastructures. So there is a highway on the west end and a railway track at the same time passing by. So complicated environment to work in. The refinery was rebuilt after the Second World War, but ceased its operation in 1955. And the story, what makes it further complex is the vicinity to the Danube, frequent flooding events, and the induced groundwater dynamics. So on the left-hand side, you see the prevailing conditions where the groundwater comes from the north and then goes down to south and exfiltrates to the Danube, if it's a normal hydrological situation or the prevailing one. In events of flooding of the Danube, it turns around about completely. So then on the right-hand side, as you see, you get an exfiltration situation if it's not really serious, so it's only that. But also means that the groundwater table is raised nearby, also in the space of the former refinery. And then you might also have really serious flooding events, like the very first in 10 years after seizing the refinery, which simply brought the groundwater above the ground, and then, so floating on the groundwater, of course, the oil and leaving it with the soil. So that's also what we found when we investigated the site 20 years ago. So it's just an overview picture giving some expression on the heavy contamination there, which luckily then was covered by a specific lithological structure to not leave the site too much, but still really intensively polluted. So if you look for the concentrations of TPH, it talks its own language. What the remediation concept there was that we opted for a combined concept of source treatment and groundwater management. In the source treatment, it was there is pre-phase still in some parts, so we work on removing it, and of course then going in parallel with water treatment there. And furthermore, we also enhanced microbiology in the unsaturated zone for invented and as well in the saturated zone. And our estimate, you see that we believe that the order of more than 1,000 tons of oil have been extracted. Nevertheless, as it's a sensitive environment, we also needed to do groundwater management. It was decided for a passive barrier, which is then along more than 1 kilometer long slurry wall, and the gates filled with activated carbon to protect the wells of neighbors and the big public drinking water station in the backland to the south. So the overall costs up to now sum up to 20 million euros. Yes, final slide. What we learned and what we feel nowadays, challenges ahead. We are now in a new phase for implementing amended legal frameworks. With the first phase will be at the national level for the revision we received this year. There are several major building blocks in there which change really our acting in the future. So, for example, for priority class 3, it will not be anymore necessarily to be remediated. So, which then, of course, simply is also a reaction to limited budgets and to allow there what, of course, will need to be done as a permanent monitoring. And we expect to, within the next, until 2030, we also will have to look for implementing the European regulation we may receive on the soil monitoring and resilience by the soil monitoring and resilience directive. We also might have some more game changers simply by new scientific knowledge and what was already raised, contaminants of emerging concern. Here in the first row, obviously, new substances like PFAS, which do involve the potential to raise for excessive costs. So that's to some extent open how we will handle that. We are still in the first phase. We have up to now the first 4 sites where we have some really serious pollution by PFAS, and we are working on to develop remediation concepts. But it's not, probably it's not only new substances. I also would point to, well, we at the same time, we also, during the last years, we also received new scientific knowledge for well-known substances like Ag or lead, which again here also then leads into a situation where we find that several sites where we have high background concentrations or spreaded diffuse contamination, it may be the same challenge like PFAS, and put forward. I would summarize then here my question the contaminated land sector faces nowadays is, where did we already exceed planetary boundaries? And if we did, how to deal with that? For both lines above, So it counts in future the final underpinned line. We will need to improve eco efficiency. So that's an old saying, to look for the factor 4 to have the money used and double the environmental impact. And that will be really then ask all our knowledge, all experts to co-work and look for tailor-made solutions. Thank you so much. Back to you, Valentina and Mark.
Thank you very much, Dietmar, for this interesting presentation. It was a great idea also to show where is Austria, especially when it comes after Australia, no? You know, it's ever confused. And there is that traffic signs that make me smile in Austria, no kangaroos, no? And
no kangaroos in Austria, yeah, just to make it obvious.
Okay, good. We also point out a couple of questions for you, but now we pass, we do it later on when we have the space for question and answer session. Now is the turn staying in Europe, then we pass to Africa. The second speaker from Europe is a friend. Let me also to thank all the RemTech Europe ambassadors that are present right now. I've seen also some speakers of RemTech that are present on the floor. So Iraklis, I want also to, if you could come up and share your screen.
Yes, Marco, hello.
Hello, could you speak a bit louder? Because we
Yes, of course. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, better that you stay closer to the microphone, because yeah, we can have some problems here in the room, and yeah, it's better that you speak loud. Shout eventually, but yeah.
No worries. I'll try my best.
Okay, Iraklis, so you have a couple of minutes more. There's Hassan just sent me a message. He can't be able to join today, so we have just 4 speeches on the first part. So a couple of minutes more, no problem. From if you need them.
Thank you, Marco. First of all, I would like to thank you for this for having me here in this very interesting conference. I'm going to present the management of contaminated site in Greece. However, as you will see, the news are not so good from Greece. However, we are trying to improve the performance regarding the contaminated sites. Greece is a country is a EU member located in the Southeast European Union. You can see on the left-hand side where the country is in Europe, and on the right-hand side you can see the map of Greece and the Natura 2000 sites, protected sites. Natura 2000 are actually the environmentally protected site, and because probably not all of you are very familiar with this European term. Let me say a few words about some general information for Greece. Greece has 11 million people, has an area of a size of something like 130 square kilometers. We have thousands of islands, which is something important in terms of development, of regional development in the country. We are one of the most mountainous countries in Europe, very diverse relief. And we have one of the lowest population density in Europe, something like 84 inhabitants per square kilometer, while, if I'm not mistaken, Netherlands is something like 400 inhabitants per square kilometer. 1/3 of the Greek population concentrates along the coastline, where the most, at least the biggest urban centers are located. We have the longest coastline in Europe, something like 15,000 kilometers, which makes the picture even more complicated because of the saltwater intrusion, and I'm going to say a few words about this later on. We are significantly dependent on groundwater resources for water supply. Something like 50% of Greeks drink groundwater. And as I said before, we have a large number of environmentally protected areas. Regarding the contaminated sites, we have already detected several industrial hotspots, and most of them are polluted with heavy metals and organics. But also we have significant agricultural production, and that's why diffuse contamination like nitrate pollution. As I said before, because of the long coastline, saltwater intrusion is an issue here in Greece. And another very important issue is the natural background, the natural or geogenic concentrations of heavy metals in soil and groundwater. And let me give you an example here. We measured several years ago in groundwater 70 micrograms per liter of hexafallen chromium in groundwater in northern Greece, as I said, while the threshold based on European legislation is 50 micrograms per liter. We are a predominantly service-based economy. We have something like 80% of services and 60 industry and only and 4% of agriculture. Although we are considered an agricultural country, however, the last decades, the country has transformed to a service-based actually society. We have mixed land uses across the areas, which is again a very important issue in terms of contaminated site management. And lately we had severe flooding events in north and in central Greece as well, which brings actually again the issue, the topic of contaminated site again in front. So we have also karstic aquifers across the country, which makes the groundwater of the country more vulnerable. We don't have emerging contaminants data, such as PFAS, and currently there are here and there some research efforts, predominantly from universities, but there is no an organized, let's say, strategy so far. And there are mega sites because of the lignite history of the country. There are mega sites that should be remediated in the near future. And also, based on my personal experience, there are significant land transfer events that we are going to face. We are currently facing, but we are going to face also in the near future. And that's why a contaminated site management framework is more than ever imperative here in Greece. Let me say a few words about the gaps that we have already detected in our management framework. Actually, we lack a robust and dedicated contaminated site management. And what we do actually is to treat, let's say, contaminated sites via the hazardous waste legislation or the environmental liability directive and the industrial emission directive, which I'm going to say a few words about this later on. This is a significant tool because of the baseline report that all the significant industry should carry it out and prepared and submitted to the authorities. But surprisingly, though, the topic of contaminated site is not directly connected to the Waste Framework Directive, which is not, of course, a best practice, and this is something that the authorities should think about again. So another important gap is that there is no regulated approach of site assessment, and that's why there is no at least regulated the aspect. We do not have regulated the aspect of a conceptual site model approach. Although, as I said before, the EID, the Industrial Emission Directive baseline reporting, is one of the most important tools here in Greece. Another very important issue is that there are no technical specifications for sampling and sample pre-treatment, and that's why consultants and authorities have typically arguments about the reliability of data and how sampling should take place. And most importantly, there are no soil screening values, and that's why, because of course we understand the importance of such a gap and the importance of to have soil screening values. We typically we adopt screening values from other countries, like the Dutch list. However, as you know, this all, you know, the way for calculating screening values are very complicated. This is not only a scientific issue, but this is also a political issue. That's why you can see sometimes huge differences between you know, among countries regarding soil screening values. And as I said before, even we have high natural background soil values, mostly for heavy metals, and we do not have so far a natural background, you know, list in order to understand and to know what the concentration, which are the concentrations in every part, the natural concentration, I mean, in every part of the country. Although the good news here is that there is a research project that is currently carried out from the Geological Survey, from the Greek Geological Survey, and probably we will have some new data on natural background, at least for some critical parts of the country. Regarding the gaps, again, we need some more, you know, competent and experienced personnel. Because the environmental authorities are typically understaffed, and sometimes this is very critical, but not only in numbers, but in competence as well. And there is no a contaminated site register available. There was an effort a decade ago. However, this, because of some gaps, probably some gaps identified, this contaminated site register was never published, and probably this will be one of the first things that the Greek government, the Greek authorities should produce the following years due to the new European legislation that we are waiting for. And I'm going to say a few words afterwards. But however, there are some good things, good results, positive outcomes. The authorities have identified the need for a robust contaminated site management framework because you know, they believe that the day-to-day life will be better. Of course, there are some competent personnel, but few in numbers. So as I said before, this should be increased, both in numbers, but also in terms of competence. Industry and service providers are willing to help because, as you know, both of these groups typically are, you know, are interested in something like that because of the problems that they have, that they are constantly facing in assessment or in future investments, etc. There are experienced academics that could support this effort. There are a few that can support. So I think that in terms of you know, scientific background, there is no problem in Greece. There is available the scientific background required. We have also Greek Research Institute that has a very good soil and groundwater experience. And to be honest, this is a little bit strange for a country. We are very good in complying with, you know, current directives like the Urban Wastewater Directive or the Industrial Emission Directive or even the Water Framework Directive. Although we typically lack proactive initiatives like this. And let me say here that in Europe, to who is not familiar with the European system, there is, as I said before, there is no a European legislation so far, but there are very advanced national frameworks. That's why we did not have, and we still don't have a framework in European level, but we as European countries, I mean, we have very advanced national contaminated site system, although there are still countries like Greece that they don't. So in order to understand a little bit more, the ministry and the GIZ, a German investment bank, actually helping the Greek Ministry of Environment and Energy a couple of years ago, asked actually to carry out a project regarding the best practices in Europe. And this is what I show you here, actually. These are the best practices that we identified in Europe, and that's why we also suggested to the Greek government. So based on our research, a single national framework governing both soil and groundwater policy is very important, and you can see here something like that in Belgium, in Germany, and the Netherlands. However, the framework should be closely linked to the land planning framework. We can see that in the Netherlands, in the UK, that they have very comprehensive soil, but also planning frameworks. We should probably have a single authority that should be responsible for contaminated sites. A very good example that I'm always mention here is OVAM in Belgium, Flanders, which I think that they have something like 200 people working only on waste management and contaminated sites in Belgium, which is a relatively small country. And complete and informal technical and non-technical framework is very important. A toolbox, let's say, is very important, not only in terms of of reliability of the sampling or chemical analysis, but also it's very important to have something like that in terms of public consultation. So France, I think it's a very good example here, where BRGM, the Geological Institute, is doing very good job there. Soil screening values, you can find soil screening values everywhere in Europe except France, where the screening values were withdrawn in 2007, and every time they faced a contaminated site, they are always working on a site-specific risk assessment. Risk assessment is always in every country, a tool, although sometimes they use it in a different way. Sometimes soil values are corrected based on soil concentrations and characteristics, let's say based on pH or concentration of organics. As I said before, sometimes institutes like BRGM in France and ISPRA in Italy is doing a very good job. Some more best practices, we found that brownfield and orphan sites are typically regulated by different tools. So you can, most of the countries have a tool, a framework for, let's say, for contaminated sites, but they have a different tool for brownfield and orphan sites. They have, all of them have contaminated sites. They have all several different land uses based on which remediation targets are designed. Some of them have soil certificate like Belgium and France, and some of them have already start developing diffuse contamination management policies. Like again, I'm talking here about the Netherlands, but Belgium as well, and USA in some states. All of you, all of us, we know that this is a very complicated subject, so there are very significant challenges to overcome, like the natural background, as I said before, the consistent behavior of the authorities, the diffuse contamination, as I said, the emerging contaminants. PFAS is a huge discussion currently worldwide, the climate crisis and contaminated soil, etc. So let me say a few words, as I said before, and I think Dietmar said mentioned also in his previous presentation. We are waiting for the new EU soil monitoring law. And that's why countries like Greece but other countries like in Balkans and in some other even in Europe should prepare. And that's why it's very important for us to exchange the best practices and trying to adopt the most important and the most efficient tools. So this actually soil monitoring law is under negotiation since 2023, and hopefully we'll have something new within 2024. Risk-based approach has been adopted in this law so far. What this law is required is to list the potentially contaminated activities by the member states, and also to identify, to investigate, and to register them, and and in general, we should say that here that the European Union set the framework and the guidelines, while the European member states actually should act and should prepare and adopt the right tools. Therefore, exchange of best practices among member states is very important issue that we will face the following years. So regarding Greece, again, what we have communicated to the ministry, and I think that they have started understood the issue, and now we are with common discussions and the project. Maybe we are going to go further, to go forward, is to create a committee in order to under the Ministry of Environment and Energy, in order to create, let's say, a first pool of knowledge. I think that what we have also decided and suggested, to build a pyramid network between the committee and the authorities in order to have a dissemination of the knowledge and the information, create a new, robust, independent, practical, informative legislation. This is very important. Complete, of course, the digital contaminated site register. As I said before, there was an effort a decade ago, but this was not comprehensive and completed. And this is something that the new soil directive requires. Use an existing soil screening values the day one. Germany, let's say, has a very easy to adopt, let's say, screening value system, and maybe we can go with this one at the beginning, while at the same time we can produce our own list. Adopt a simple land use categorization. There are several different categorization systems in Europe. Italy has something, let's say, more simple than the Netherlands, that is more thorough and complicated. Actually, we should add soil and groundwater investigation tools in several different parts of the permitting procedure, and of course, participation of pertinent personnel in EU professional networks like the Common Forum on Contaminated Land and Nicole, which are doing great job actually. And there are some further steps, more optimistic, let's say, in a long shot. Design an integrated soil strategy, build a contaminated soil frame in general, organize a new administrative body, create a diffuse contaminated strategy, a strategy from brownfield as well, a new soil screening values list just for Greece, based on Greek conditions, determine soil natural background, design a risk assessment methodology. Maybe we should think of creating an accreditation procedure for contaminated site experts. Belgium has something like that, and France as well. So enhance the capacity buildings of pertinent authority. This is always an issue here in Greece. And as I said before, not only in terms of numbers, but in terms of competence. Again, maybe we should introduce a soil certificate. This is a best practice used in several countries around EU. And maybe we should also think about to introduce soil passport for solar use, for excavated solar use. So this was actually our presentation regarding the management of contaminated sites in Greece. And of course, I'm available for any question. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Iraklis, for your interesting presentation. Now we can move to the next speaker, is Neyza Mejad from Morocco. She presents a contribution entitled The Challenge of Radionuclides Contamination in Morocco. Neyza, are you live?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, now.
Okay, I'm starting the sharing.
The sharing? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, here it is. Okay. So hello everybody. I'm so happy to be part of this meeting.
Can you put in full screen mode your presentation?
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
So hello everybody. I'm so happy to be part of this meeting, and my presentation it's entitled Radionuclide Contamination in Morocco. So to start, I will present the location of Morocco. It's located in the northwest corner of Africa, bordered by the North Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Ocean. Mauritania and Algeria are the land border of the south and east of Morocco, respectively, as you can see in the map. So here I wanted to present the state of knowledge about research related to radioactive contamination in Morocco. So as you can see here that according to Scopus database, I found 17 documents for the date range between 2001 and 2023. As you can see that the research related to radioactive contamination is mainly on subject of environment, medicine, chemistry, energy, and the main collaboration is carried out with France, Austria, Germany, Italy, and Spain. Here we can see that there is two clusters. The first cluster is on water and sediment contamination by radioactive elements. And the second cluster is mainly related to the radiation doses and possible and potential impact of radioactive contamination. So now let's see what is the Moroccan experience in nuclear science and technology application. So the use of ionizing radiation in Morocco since 70s has been developing increasingly in different socio-economic sectors, including medicine, health, agriculture, energy, research and development, environment, and water. So the building of the Ma'moura Nuclear Research Center in 2003 and the exploitation of the nuclear research reactor opened new opportunities and gave rise to new applications, which contributed to enhancing training and education capabilities, expertise, and international cooperation related, of course, to the use and use of nuclear techniques. So great effort have been deployed over the last 4 decades to enhance human resource and competencies through academic education and professional training program with the support of international cooperation to ensure sustainable development of nuclear application in various social and economic sectors. So let's see what are the national legal and regulatory framework for safety, security, and safeguard. The development of activities, of course, in different socio-economic sectors that use the ionizing radiation requires the establishment of a legislative and regulatory framework that allows for a regulatory oversight of nuclear and radiological facilities and the activities that are consistent with international obligations of the state and the international standards. So In this sense, in the early 70s, Morocco has established the first component of a legal framework that governs all activities and facilities that use and process ionizing radiation source. And in the 80s, the main components of regulatory framework were put in force, including nuclear safety, radiation protection, and nuclear liability. So at this time, this framework designated two regulatory bodies, the Ministry in charge of Energy, which was responsible for the licensing and inspections of nuclear installation and activities, while the Ministry of Health was responsible for the authorization and inspection of activities and facilities using ionizing radiation source in different sectors, industrial, agriculture, medical, etc. So this legal and regulatory framework has been useful in exercising regulatory oversight in all activities in Morocco, including the construction and commissioning and operation of the Ma'moura Nuclear Research Center. So the Kingdom of Morocco has then signed and ratified the main United Nations international conventions related to nuclear and radiation safety and security. And to be fully consistent with its international obligation, Morocco has developed a new and comprehensive law addressing both nuclear and radiological safety and security and safeguard. So in 2016, the Moroccan Agency for Nuclear and Radiological Safety and Security was established under a virtue of the law number 142/12 on nuclear and radiological safety and security and deviation of the AMSNOR. AMSNOR mission was to ensure the radiological and nuclear safety and security of all activities and facilities that involve ionizing radiation sources according to this law number 142/12. So Morocco was, in fact, the first African country to ratify the joint convention that has been signed with the International Atomic Energy Agency, and the Centre National de l'Énergie des Sciences et Techniques Nucléaires has been designated as the lead entity within the country for radioactive waste management. So the main national nuclear program is concerning the application in human health, water, nutrition, environment, food and agriculture, industry, energy safety, security, education, training, and international cooperation. So the nuclear center Kneston is involved in these programs with different socioeconomic operators, national research institutions, universities, and foreign partners. So let's present the nuclear center Kneston, which has as objectives to promote and enhance the contribution of the peaceful uses of nuclear techniques to the sustainable development efforts of the socio-economic sectors of Morocco. And the nuclear center is International Atomic Energy Agency collaborating center in different fields, including water resource management, environmental protection, industrial application, and radioactive waste management. And also, Kneston participates in several international projects such as Atlas, CALIS, among others. While the scientific program includes different sectors, as I said, health, environmental protection, safety and security, material science, sustainable management of water resources, and natural resources in agriculture, and radioactive waste management and energy. So the mission of Kneston was created firstly in 1986 to promote at the national level the application of nuclear science and technology for the benefits of scientific and also socio-economic development of the country. While the main mission of nuclear center is to develop scientific research in nuclear science and technology, promote nuclear science technology application in social and economic sector, contribute to the development of nuclear infrastructure for nuclear program, acting as a technical support organization to the national authorities in the field of radiation and nuclear safety, security, safeguard, emergency preparedness, and response. So the strategic objectives of CNESTEN is as follows: it will enhance the utilization, as I said, of Ma'moura Nuclear Research Center facilities, maintaining a high nuclear safety level, performing research and development to address national societal needs, developing technical support capabilities for the national authorities in terms of safety and security, etc., developing financial self-reliance capabilities, establishing a training and education reference center at national and regional level in nuclear science and technology, and developing and preserving the human capital and expertise. Here, the major program of CNESTEN that include agriculture, health, life science, water and climate, industry, radioactive waste management, nuclear safety and security, research in material science, and education and training. Now let's go to the waste management. So during the last decades, there is development and trend toward using the nuclear technology in various socio-economic sectors that include medicine, agriculture, as I said before, industry, etc., etc. And this will lead to the generation of different types of radioactive waste. And this waste must be managed in compliance with the principle of protecting the both public environment and also not impose undue burden in future generations. So the mission of was assigned to CNESTEN and explicitly specified in its creation law. In this context, CNESTEN established an infrastructure dedicated to the collection, processing, and securing of radioactive waste generated by various national users. So CNESTEN has adopted 3 methods of treatment: evaporation for aqueous liquid effluent, compaction for radioactive solid waste, dismantling of disused solid radioactive source category 3 to 5 in order to reduce the volume to be stored. So regarding the classification of radioactive waste, Morocco generally follows the guidelines set out in the International Atomic Energy Agency Safety Guide GSG1 regarding the classification of radioactive waste expressed as follows. So we have 6 classification. First, exempt waste, very short-lived waste, very low level waste, low level waste, intermediate level waste, and high level waste. Regarding the generated waste in the Kingdom of Morocco, radioactive, of course, waste, we only have low and intermediate level, short-lived and very short-lived radioactive waste that are generated in Morocco from programs for nuclear applications such as medicine, industry, agriculture, and research. So Morocco does not generate any high-level radioactive waste nor long-lived radiological contaminated waste. So here are the following type of waste are currently being generated in the Kingdom of Morocco. Very short-lived waste. So after the approval by AMSNOR, delay and decay strategy is adopted for the solid form, and durite and display strategy is adopted for the liquid and gaseous forms. For very low-level waste, waste with activity concentration or low regulatory concern or waiting discharge limits are related to the atmosphere or landfill. Low-level waste and intermediate level waste. So for the low-level waste, the concentrate and contain strategy is adopted. So here we arrive to case study. So we have several projects carried out in collaboration with the International Atomic Energy Agency to monitor and control the contamination level in marine ecosystem, among other projects. So here I am presenting a project that was carried out in the framework of a project to monitor the pollution, radioactive pollution in the Moroccan Atlantic coast, so from Tangier to Liguira. And here we found that the concentration of radioactive elements were below the standard value. And also we have carried out the established the chronology of pollution, contamination by radioactive elements. So as you can see here that the almost the activities is uniform, small fluctuation, but still below the standard value. Here another study in framework of project on transfer of radionuclide soil plant system. And this project was carried out as an emergency preparedness in case of nuclear accidents affecting soil. So the same here, we have calculated the transfer of radioactive potassium, radium, and lead-13 from soil to plant. And we have found that the activities and the transfer factor are below the standard value. So similarly here, we have also calculated the dose rate of natural radioactivity in vegetable from agricultural area, or the value were also below the normal and the standard value. So here, as summary, the Kingdom of Morocco has become a member state of the International Atomic Energy Agency in 1957 and signed and ratified the most important international instrument under the International Atomic Energy Agency auspices, such as the Joint Convention on the Safety of Spent Fuel and Radioactive Waste Management. Morocco then has a well-established legislative framework covering regulatory and compliance assurance mechanism and has made some progress since 2011. A comprehensive system of environmental authorization exists across a range of environmental issues, including air pollution, waste generation and disposal, natural resource use, underground resource use, surface and groundwater use, blue carbon sequestration, ozone depleting substances, and radioactive sources. So Morocco has introduced several projects, partnerships, and roadmaps to ensure proper management of different types of waste, such as agricultural waste, radioactive waste, paper, plastic, used chairs, used batteries, and end-of-life vehicles. So that's it. And for more information about what are the law and the regulatory framework and the experience of Morocco in the use of nuclear technique and also the waste management, because 15 minutes I cannot talk about all the processes of waste management in the nuclear center. Here the main references. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Neza. Very, very interesting presentation. We have also couple of questions for you. I just remind all the people that are online and all the people that are here in Taranto, if they want to ask any questions or to any of the 4 speakers that we had, feel free to raise your hand or put into the chat eventually. So we have 20 minutes of discussion, question and answer. I would start with Andrew. It's very late in Australia. Andrew, thank you to stay up now. Should be midnight around in Australia. And yeah, I have a question. Neza, if you could unshare your screen.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm searching out.
Okay, good. Thank you. Andrew, I want to come back to your presentation, and you know, PFAS is under the debate in all Europe, UK, Scandinavian, US, Australia. Many countries are trying to face this class of compounds of 4,700 at least. It was the evaluation of number of PFAS that was done by the, if I'm not wrong, by the US EPA. My question is, in Australia, are you planning to make, let's say, some indicators on PFAS that could have a decisional role, so a subset of, I don't know, 10, 20 PFAS, or you are going to, let's say it's not an alternative, you are going to measure total PFAS. That is also under debate in several European projects. It's difficult to, to measure this total PFAS because we have still to understand what is a PFAS and what is not, depends to different definitions. So it's an open question. If you can stay in 2 minutes, 2 minutes would be great.
Sure, that's a very broad question, Marco. So I don't want to get too technical with the audience here. I'll cover it at a fairly high level. So the main driver that kicked off the PFAS contamination questions was from aqueous film forming foam, AFFF, used for firefighting. So firefighting foams have 2 main families of PFAS in them. The older foams were made through electrochemical fluorination, like PFOS, and they were found in products like 3M light water. And then there were more modern foams, fluorotelomere foams, with more complex structures. The standard laboratory analysis will detect 16 or 28 or 40 or 56 PFAS. It won't detect the thousands. The standard lab methods find only anionic surfactants. They don't find the zwitterionic or the cationic. They don't find the ethanols, the volatile PFAS. So there are many PFAS that are missed. One method that is used to detect the missing PFAS is total organic fluorine. It's a challenging lab method with a high level of reporting. Another method is the total oxidizable precursor assay. Again, that's another challenging method. It's a difficult recipe for a laboratory, and the results are very variable. So in Australia, we are likely to be heading towards a toxicity equivalence factor approach, similar to the approach that we use for polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and similar to that used for dioxins. It's still a work in progress, though. The regulators are still working out their approach. I'll give you an example of the rate of change in Australia. So from the decision to come up with the national guidance to the publication of the first national guidance for PFAS was about 9 months, which was amazingly fast and unheard of in Australian environmental policy and regulation. The second, that was published in 2018. The second guideline came out in 2020, the version 2. And the version 3 came out as a draft early last year, and it has not yet been revised. The version 3, there's an intent to issue a version 3, and that will include some answers to questions like this, but it's proving to be a difficult challenge for the regulators. It's as we are going deeper, I guess, down the rabbit hole of PFAS, it is a very complicated issue, and trying to make a sensible, pragmatic, implementable guidance is difficult.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. I pass the floor to Valeria as a question for Dietmar. Stay online briefly, Andrew. If we have time, I have a second round and a second question for you. Valeria.
Yes, thank you, Marco. Okay, Dietmar, we want to ask you if you developed a method to prioritize a contaminated site. We have noted in your presentation that in your country you can visualize and define the different level of contamination. So can you suggest how to manage polluted sites based on the contamination level?
Well, in terms of classification and prioritization, it's simply against the background that the legislation asks for to put it in the context of the urgency of financing remediation projects. And we decided for a 3-class system. We had a first methodology in the early 90s. We, similar like other countries, we copied and pasted it from Germany. By 20 years ago, in 2002, we finalized, came up with our own procedure in risk classification, which is, well, there is a threefold risk assessment for each site. So considering groundwater, considering soil, and considering any vapor and air intrusions in separate strings. And then each string, there is a classification which works along the source pathway receptor paradigm. Then boiling it down to make it simple, to cut it long story short, there are technical background papers, and we also need to communicate it to our politicians and to citizens. And to make that available, it's more or less a very simple system where each of the three arguments, the source, the pathway, and the receptor, may receive a maximum of 4 points. So then you get then kind of 3 priority classes according to how many points each site receives. And the maximum score at the site then decides on the priority class and offers the possibility to get the funding accordingly to the roads. Does that more or less answer your question, Valentina?
Thank you very much, Dietmar. Okay.
It's Dietmar.
Dietmar, sorry for
Well,
calling
you
inexactly your name.
He's the most important guy in Europe on contaminated sites. So
Okay.
Unluckily, with a very German name.
Okay, thank you, Dietmar. We come back later with the second question. Iraklis, are you online? And my question to you, Iraklis, you mentioned a bit also this. If could be possible to consider the soil monitoring law as a driver for implementing an appropriate regulation on contaminated sites in Greece. We are aware that regulation is not yet in place in Greece, and the question is this: could be the decisive driver, the soil monitoring law, to set up a regulation in Greece?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Marco. Yes, of course. This is actually, as I said during my presentation, actually the way that the Greek authorities behave is this. I mean, they consider important everything that is coming from EU. So if something at least in environmental legislation has not been regulated in EU, this considered as not important. That's my explanation. I mean, so for us, it's very important to have something like that. We understand that most of the countries in EU, at least in North EU, Northwestern EU, have their own frameworks. However, it's very important to have a common ground. So we are waiting for this desperately.
Allora,
this directive.
Quando parliamo di responsabilità sociale d'impresa parliamo di un mondo molto ampio che
Please mute your phone.
Yeah, sorry, there was some noise, some background noise. Thank you, Iraklis.
Quindi dicevamo, la responsabilità sociale d'impresa è un concetto molto ampio. Oggi io vorrei declinarlo appunto essendo...
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. There were some problems of audio. Sorry for this. Question. Thank you, Iraklis, and I think also I would make this statement that is the soil monitoring law will be absolutely important also for other countries outside EU 27 that does not have a framework on contaminated sites. I'm looking to the accession countries, Balkan countries, as well as Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, no, that does not have yet
Albania, Kosovo, etc. Yeah, all of them that they are in a pre-accession, let's say, regime.
Yeah, in fact. Floor to Valeria. She has a question for Neza.
Yes. Okay. Yes, Neza. We want to ask you if you know if in the other countries of the North Africa are adopting or want to adopt the regulatory for radioactive contamination management used by Morocco that you have described.
Yeah, really, I don't have idea about, but what I know that Morocco was the first country, African country, to adopt this regulatory.
Okay, so first example, and hoping that also the others will join the International Atomic Agency also for because they have also, I'm aware that they have also some natural occurring radioactive materials. Thank you, Neza. I will come back to Andrew if he is still online. It's very late. And Andrew, if you could describe, we are discussing in Europe also which are the best technologies for managing or remediating PFAS. What is the technology trend that you have right now in Australia?
Okay.
Flotation or I don't know,
Sure.
activated carbon. Yeah, 1 minute if
So,
you can.
1 minute. So very quickly, we have some fixed facilities that use thermal treatment to remove PFAS from soils. We have some mobile plants.
Anche stimolare quanto più è il riutilizzo delle risorse primarie.
I don't know where that is coming from. It's okay.
There are some problems in audio. Please continue, Andrew.
Okay, I'll keep talking. So for water treatment, there's the two main methods for water treatment in source areas is foam fractionation and filtration using activated carbon or unexchanged resin. We've had a successful trial of a soil washing plant, but soil washing only has a few limited applications. And finally, we use stabilization, mixing with stabilizing compounds, or usually organo-modified clays and carbons to reduce the mobility and the leachability of the PFAS so that it may remain on that site, but it won't wash away to the aquifer or the surface water systems.
We cannot.
I think the audio has been resolved through your microphone being turned off.
Some of the microphones that are there. Okay.
While you're working that out, I can provide some more information about remediation systems. So the most difficult question really is whether to remediate,
let's say that,
whether to manage on site, whether to manage off site,
we have some
and it's the standard tools apply: the conceptual site model, the source pathway receptor model, the data quality objectives process. What are the questions you're trying to solve? And then the availability of technologies will flow on from there.
So we have a break. Let's say
Australia looks a lot at the Battelle Organisation Conference, the Chlorinated and Recalcitrant Chemicals Conference that's happening in Denver next week in Colorado. That is a great source of information
see you later, and while
for us in our
we are
projects.
trying to solve this
and those online will also refer you to the US Department of Defense and Department of Energy programs CERTIP and ESTCP, the excellent programs for assessing and reviewing improving remediation technologies for PFAS. I can't hear you, Marco. I'm not sure if you're talking to me, but I can't hear a word you're saying.
Just to repeat that, it's interesting. I'm on neither hearing. It's interesting to get explanations from Australia, but I lost all the context.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, we have some.
But I lost again, and it was a terrible.
Dietmar, I'm very happy to speak to you.
Yeah. Sorry, we had some kind of interference. And we come back with after the coffee break.
Okay, no problem. Very nice to speak with you.
Let's try to solve it after the fix it after the coffee break. So you deserve it as much, Andrew. Or let's say, no, it couldn't be a sundowner, but something similar to relax.
Yes, I think actually it's midnight midnight for me. It's I may go to bed now. So very nice to meet you.
Very good. So thank you so much for staying with us. Yeah. Looking forward to being talking. Bye.
A pleasure. I'll catch you later. All right. Bye-bye.
Can I ask a question?
Who would you like to ask the question of?
Yeah, Dr. Iraklis.
Abbiamo scritto 20 minuti. We are in coffee break. Perché siamo ancora connessi.
Hello, Dr. Iraklis, can I ask a question to you?
Well, I think Iraklis will be available after the coffee break, and you may ask your question then.
Okay. Sure. Okay.